Hi, I'm Aparna Andhare, an editor with LHI Circle and its resident art historian. Miniature painting or manuscript painting traditions in India had a deep connection with literature, appearing first as illustrations, as we see in Jain manuscripts, and developed into pictorial narratives and visual storytelling, often dominating the folio space. A genre of paintings that captured artists' imagination and patrons' fancy are the depiction of the 12 months called Barahmasa. The specialty of the Barahmasa theme was its narrator, usually a Naika or a heroine separated from her beloved, so-called a Virahini. Stories of romance, secular and religious, were a part of Jain, Bhakti and Sufi traditions and crucial to the genre. The origins of Barahmasa are in folk and oral traditions and in literature with descriptions of seasons, sentiments of protagonists and poetic metaphors. While we can't peg an exact date to the origin of the Barahmasa, it developed in the north of the subcontinent and became popular in western, central and eastern regions. Scholar Charlotte Vaudeville argues that the Sanskrit poetry had descriptions of 6 seasons, the Shadaritu, and not Barahmasa specifically, which came from vernacular oral traditions. Just as the genre was popular in several regions, it also encompassed religious poetry found in Jain, Sikh, Sufi, and Bhakti literature. It was composed in several languages: Prakrit, Sanskrit, Braj, Bagheli, Bengali, Awadhi, early Gujarati, early Hindi, Marathi, and Urdu, to name just a few. We can trace the influence of this genre to poems like the Ritu Samhara, written in the 5th century by the poet Kalidasa, where he charts out seasons and their descriptions. Barahmasa is often credited to the Orchha poet Keshav Das, who was born in 1555, and his poem Rasik Priya, composed in the late 16th century. The poem was profusely illustrated in his own time and beyond, so paintings of the Rasik Priya are found in whole and dispersed sets in museum collections around the world. The 10th canto is based on the Barahmasa, with descriptions of each month and a corresponding sentiment, which becomes the foundation document of this theme, impacting iconography. In many sets, especially from Rajput courts, it's usually verses of Keshav Das that are inscribed on the paintings. The iconography of Barahmasa paintings may seem like they overlap with genres like the Ragmala, which is a visual representation of a musical mood. So how do we identify them? Usually through inscriptions. Verses of paintings are often inscribed on the folio, or a scribe might leave helpful notes. Visual codes for these paintings come from as far back as the 4th century in a text called the Chitta Sutra of the Vishnu Dharmottar Puran and the Natya Shastra. Codified roles of the hero and heroine, called the Nayak and Nayika Bhed, persist from the Natya Shastra, and explorations of the Shringar Rasa grew richer with the development of Barahmasa paintings. In many depictions, the hero and heroine are Krishna and his consort Radha, with Radha frequently turning into an archetypal heroine or a Naika, especially with paintings from Rajasthan, a region that has a strong Vaishnav leaning. By the 15th century, artists began to visualize this genre, weaving it into different stories, and a multitude of paintings emerged in a wide range of styles. Earliest folios of the Barahmasa are from the Lord Chanda of Mulla Daud from the 15th and the 16th century, which are evidently an amalgamation of Jain, Central Asian and Indic styles. By the 17th century, the lives of Krishna dominated the visualization of Barahmasa paintings. Barahmasa paintings flourished in the 18th century. In addition to Rajput schools, Marathi poets explored the genre in literature and art, while master artists of the Pahari school of Guler and Kangra were making their own distinctive sets of this genre into the 19th century. While the Barahmasa follows the Hindu calendar and visualizes seasonal variations and festivals, it's important to note that the calendars shift regionally, much like time zones today, and have their own versions of names and festivals. Chaitra and Baisakh depict Vasant or spring and mark the beginning of the year. This depiction of Chaitra made in Bundi shows a lush garden pavilion with couples on both sides. Radha and Krishna on the left and a royal couple on the right. The start of the year is auspicious, with lovers united and nature flourishing. The depiction of Baisakh from Mehrangarh Museum shows Maharaja Man Singh as the hero enjoying the day in a garden pavilion with his consort. Two attendants work a big textile fan called pankha mounted on the roof of the tent, while another has a fan in her hand, suggesting the weather is getting warmer. The ruler, as a Nayak, reiterates ideas of divine kingship and suggests the Maharaja as a true Rasika, a connoisseur. As spring gives way to summer, let's consider these three paintings, all from the 18th century and made in different parts of Rajasthan. The folios depict the month of Jyeshtha, when summer is at its harshest. In the first folio from Bikaner, the hero stands on the threshold of a palace. The scorching heat has turned everything to dust, and not even the fountain has any water. The lower right corner has a pavilion with large urns filled with water, and a small figure, parched, asks for a drink. An elephant suffers in the heat in the top right corner, indicating the torment of the summer. A succinct inscription on the top declares this to be the month of Jyeshtha. The elephant as a leitmotif of the summer comes from Keshav Das, who compares the heat of the season to drunken elephants. This folio, possibly made in Jaipur, shows a prince in a garden pavilion being fanned by his attendants, listening to music as a water bearer gently sprays water, attempting to ease the heat. The garden seems parched with brown earth showing and a burbling fountain providing some relief to the birds. Rituals are also depicted as a part of the Barahmasa genre, as shown in this Bundi painting. The end of Jyeshtha has a ritual when women fast and pray to the banyan tree for their husband's long life. This incomplete painting with rough lines shows Krishna watching gopis or milkmaids seek a long life for the deity himself, whom they've accepted as their beloved. The three folios depict an unbearable summer and the feeling of being parched and needing relief. With Ashad, rains are keenly awaited, except by the lovelorn heroine who wants to be reunited with her beloved before the season of love, monsoon, arrives. The lines on the top of the folio are by the poet Keshav, who describes the month of Ashad as the one of anticipation. The heroine is impatient and prepares to meet her beloved, while ascetics perform rituals before the onset of the monsoon. Sawan and Bhadra or Bhadon has monsoon in all its glory, with dark skies and rains, and in this season, all travelers return home to their wives and beloved. This Jaipur folio shows Krishna at his doorstep being received by his wife. The artist depicts an overflowing river in the foreground and has birds taking shelter in dense trees. The top register shows lightning and a heavy downpour with peacocks on the roof. The inscription on the top of the folio is a description of the season in verse. This famous Kangra school depicts Bhadon, the season of the most torrential rain, in a pleasure pavilion far, far away overlooking a river valley. A couple is listening to music on a balcony, and despite this magnificent storm, they're looking into each other's eyes as a female musician performs a suitable monsoon melody. The inscription on top of the folio states, "This is the depiction of the rainy season," and the bottom has a poem. Perhaps it's this poem that the singers are performing. Ashwin is the month of festivals and the 9 days of the goddess. This folio from Jaipur issues instructions for rituals and specifically asks the viewer to venerate the Navdurga, or the 9th form of the goddess, as is seen in the bottom right corner. In a folio from the same set, we see the depiction of Kartik, the month when the festival of Diwali is celebrated. The folio has lamps lit on the palace walls, an auspicious rangoli, and a heroine playing chaupat with Krishna. In the foreground, prayers and rituals are being performed, perhaps all night long, with floating lamps decorating a pool. Margashirsha and Paush are the months of winter as the weather gets decidedly chilly. The month of Margashirsha in this Pahari painting from Kangra or Guler is stylistically typical of the region. We see the heroine swathed in a blanket, leaning against Krishna, who holds her tenderly and offers her a pan. They're alone, and 2 candles burn brightly as several stars twinkle in the sky overhead. The cozy quotient of this painting is a feature of Pahari painting rarely found in other schools. This lyrical painting depicting Posh was made in Rajasthan in the mid-18th century and brings out a different kind of companionship. We see women in a courtyard, with 2 of them warming their hands over a small angeti or hearth, and a third standing at the door clutching her shawl. The courtyard is empty and quiet, bereft even of usually ubiquitous birds, and the mood is quite pensive. Mark tests the heroine's patience as she yearns for her beloved, whether divine in form of Krishna or simply her husband. This folio, made in the 18th or the 19th century, depicts the heroine lying on her bed in the courtyard, surrounded by her attendants and friends pining for her beloved. From the foliage, arrows of love, not to be confused by that of Cupid, are being shot at her, indicating her suffering. This trial will come to an end soon as Falgun or Fagun approaches. Fagun brings the year to a close with celebrations, especially with the festival of colours, Holi. This 19th century folio from the Punjab captures the spirit of the season. Lovers have united, music filled the air, and as we can see in this cheerful picture, colours are being boisterously played. Playing with a range of depictions, Barahmasa paintings conform to stylistic choices, religious and sectoral affiliations, and the status of patrons. These folios were extensively commissioned and avidly collected well into the 20th century. Oral traditions to this day perform songs based on sets of months: Chaumasa for 4 months, Chhaimasa for 6, and Ashtamasa for group of 8, and of course the Barahmasa. India's engagement with calendar prints continues well into the modern era, especially with the wildly popular prints by Raja Ravi Verma, but that is a story for another time.